Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sreenivasan. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and founder of DigiMentors, an organization that works on social, digital, and virtual event consulting. I am honored to gather everybody every day for the last 80 days to talk about this topic of COVID-19 and to talk around COVID-19. We try to do a show that highlights topics and ideas that you may not see on mainstream television or in the news. And we are honored that people from around the world join us. If you're watching right now, tell us where you're watching from. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Please find me on those channels and please hit share. Please tag someone who would benefit from this show. Please retweet on Twitter. And also, please go to my YouTube channel so you can see the archives of all my shows. We do a daily program like this, and we also do a Sunday show where we read the New York Times out loud. We've been doing that for 5 years. And during the COVID-19 crisis, we've been trying to focus around issues of COVID-19. Let me just tell you about the show we had this morning. The morning started with a terrific roster of speakers. We met with Sunny Slaughter, a business leader and activist and consultant. We met with Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate in economics, who also talks about so many other issues, including inequality in this country. And Dr. Mona Abaza joined us from the University of Colorado to talk about how healthcare workers are being affected. It was a fantastic, insightful show. We smiled, we cried, and we learned a lot. And we hope you will take a look by going into my YouTube archives. Very easy to find on youtube.com/Sreenet. Today is Sunday, and Sunday is when we do our positivity show every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Today, of course, we're not feeling that positive considering everything that's been happening in this country. But we still want to look at how we can, in this particular episode, as we do on every Sunday, be constructive, be purposeful, and to learn from purposeful and positive people. And today we have a very special guest, and we're going to give you a chance to meet her in just a minute. Our episode is called Positively Inclusive with Dr. Stefanie K. Johnson. She's a professor, author, and speaker, and you'll meet her in just a couple of minutes. Her new book, Inclusify, releases June 2nd, inclusifybook.com. Everybody should go and check that out. And you can find her on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Inclusifybook. And she's also on LinkedIn, Dr. Steph Johnson. And she's also on YouTube at Dr. Steph Johnson. So we hope you'll all take a look at that. And we will introduce you to her in just a couple of minutes. We always want to start by thanking those who have supported us, and that includes our viewers from around the world. Please type in, tell us where you're watching from, tell us what you're thinking about in the time of this crisis, both the pandemic and in America, the focus on racial injustice. We also want to thank our sponsors for these 80 days who have supported us and made it possible for me to bring you this show on a daily basis to help support the work of our producers, such as Vandana _Menon, and Rose Horowitz, Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter. Please follow both of them as well. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is that I know what it's like to lose a job and to lose it in a public way. And I know the pain that a family can go through and what turmoil it causes within a family. So it's so hard for me to imagine 40 million Americans out of work now and hundreds of millions out of work around the world. What can we do for them? We can't, as myself as a small effort, there's so little we can do. But one thing we can do is try to help people with their social and digital media skills. And so talking to our friends at Muckrack, which is a terrific organization that works with professionals in PR and journalism, we have come up with this offering. It's a free Fundamentals of Social Media course for journalists, PR professionals, and everyone. Everyone can benefit from this. You can just go on to mrac.co/social and you can join right now. The course starts in June in a couple of weeks, but you can register today. Free certification course available to people of all ages, all backgrounds, any industry, any level of experience. My colleague Linda Bernstein and I are putting together a really good course, if I may say so. And we're very grateful to Muckrack Academy and our friends Mike Schneider and Greg Gallant for letting us have this free for everybody in the world. More than 3,000 people have signed up. And we hope you will take a screenshot or take a photograph and keep this and send it to people in your lives. Please sign up for this course. It starts in a couple of weeks, mrac.co/social. All right, we are now ready to talk to our guest, Professor Dr. Stefanie Johnson. I'm going to bring her on screen and then ask her a little bit about how she's doing and then give you a little more of her biography as well. So here we go. Please say hello to Dr. Stefanie Johnson. Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. You are coming to us live, and we are very grateful for you, for being here. First question I ask all my guests, how are you? Where are you?
Okay, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, in my basement. I don't know how specific you want me to be. And that's a harder question. This is Sunday Positivity, so I'd love to say, I'm bursting with joy, and I often am bursting with joy, but the, events of the last few days have made it pretty hard to feel that positive. I have a lot of friends in the African American community who are just really struggling right now with the violence against Black men in America, mostly.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that we are going to think about, ways we can be constructive and helpful in this conversation as we spend the next hour or so together. Folks, if you're watching right now, please post, tell us where you're watching from, ask some questions of Dr. Johnson, and she will give us some of her insights into her work around inclusion and diversity. I'm going to just pull up her bio so I can tell you a little bit more about her. And so she is an associate professor of management at the University of Colorado Boulder's Leeds School of Business. She studies the intersection of leadership and diversity, focusing on how unconscious bias affects the evaluation of leaders and strategies that leaders can use to mitigate bias. She's published over 70 journal articles and book chapters in outlets such as Harvard Business Review, Journal of Applied Psychology, and the Academy of Management Journal. Her book has been described by Billie Jean King, in the following way. In Inclusify, Stefanie K. Johnson takes the conversation beyond diversity, moving us closer to real inclusion and equality. Her positive spin on what we can achieve by working together will change the workplace. So that's mighty praise from the mighty Billie Jean King. Tell us a little bit about the premise of your book and how it came to be.
Yeah, definitely. So the idea of the book is that we're missing out on some benefits of diversity in the workplace, because even when we have diversity, we don't necessarily have inclusion, because we don't hear all the voices at the table equally. And as I researched this problem, I was surprised to find that most managers and leaders really want to do a good job at this, and they're trying really hard to do a good job at this, but they just don't necessarily understand what it takes to create inclusion. And so the book goes through some basic ideas about unconscious bias and diversity and inclusion, but then really looks at the subtle ways that leaders go wrong, they might misstep, and how they can easily course correct to become more inclusive leaders.
Tell us the full title of your book, please.
Oh my gosh.
You have to look at it too, don't you?
I'm not sure I can. So Inclusify, the power of uniqueness and belonging to build more innovative teams.
Yeah, that sounds great. And tells us also what we need to kind of understand how this is something that can apply even in the work beyond the workplace, right? This should also be thinking of government is also workplace, right? How can government leaders think about inclusion? People who work in law enforcement, how can they think about diversity and inclusion? And so I'm sure we'll have questions around all of those topics, and I have some for you. But first, Professor, we do something that we call a global tour, where we see where people are watching from around the world. We want everyone to type in and tell us where you're watching from. And everyone, please share this right now with your networks. Tag somebody who would benefit from this conversation with Dr. Johnson. So let's go in right now and look at some of the comments. From Union Square is Jonathan Borstein is watching, where the crisis unfolded, the protest unfolded outside his window last night while we were on the air. So he was sharing photographs and doing reporting right from his window. Jonathan, I'm glad you're okay, and you've watched for 81 straight days. I can't tell you how grateful I am to you and to see you back on my show every day. Laurie's watching from Dobbs Ferry, just up the river here. Rohit is watching from Bangalore, India. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. And Pradnya is a great friend of this show. We're very grateful to her. Peter Knox is watching up from Ithaca, which is, again, we're going upstate New York now. And Lori White is here watching from Rhode Island, eager to hear about Inclusify. Thank you. She's the president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. So she certainly understands the value of diversity and inclusion in the business workplace. Let's see who else is watching. Anand Babu is listening from India, and Jocelyn is watching from Boston. So this is great that so many people are here. Susanna is watching from Mexico. And Judith is watching from Waco, Texas. I'm thinking often about community, interconnectedness, education, inclusivity, equity, and justice. Look at that. She brought all of those themes together, and that's, I think, really, really nice. And Sarah is watching from Cochin in Kerala, India. And great to have you here, Sarah. Kerala is where my parents are, Stefanie. And I'm very grateful to always have folks from all over the world watching us. And Arlene's watching from New York City, and Pradnya is tagging her friends. Everybody do that. Someone who would benefit from this conversation. Sarah says that's a great subject to study. Ashok Vyas is watching from New York. Angela is watching from Long Island. So how does it feel to have this kind of global conversation, Professor?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Look at this. Arjun's watching from Montreal. And Mithil is watching from New Jersey, and Nikhil's watching from Connecticut. I just love this tour. Eason Jordan is also watching. My friend Neil Parekh is watching from Springfield, Virginia. Sunny Slaughter and Darlene Slaughter, you might be interested in this discussion on inclusion. There's a book launch on Tuesday, and we'll talk about that book launch too. I just want to do a shout out to Eason Jordan, who is joining us today on LinkedIn. So everyone, please, who is on LinkedIn, please tag friends there. That's such a great network for the work that we want to do. But I want to tell you that Eason will be a guest on my show on Monday night. We have a very special episode on Monday night because we are going to be talking about what is a landmark birthday. And the landmark birthday is not mine or anyone else's. It's the birthday of CNN. It's the 40th anniversary of CNN. And we have a show that is going to look at the history of CNN. Lisa Napoli will be here. She's the author of the brand new Up All Night, Ted Turner, CNN, and the Birth of 24-Hour News. And that is tomorrow night at 10 p.m. special, 10 p.m. Eastern Time show. And Eason Jordan, former CNN chief news executive, and a gentleman who worked at CNN for 23 years. They'll both be here on our show tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern. So we will pause the global tour there so we can get back to talking to Steph Johnson. And my first question for you is, how did you decide that this is a good topic for you to study? Sounds like you've been working on it a long time.
Yeah. So I actually have to be honest, I don't have a great answer because when I was a kid and went to graduate school, I actually didn't want to study diversity or gender issues. I wanted to study something like a really masculine business professor topic because I am like a first generation Mexican female. And I thought if I study diversity, no one's ever going to hire me. And, but in my research, I always found gender and racial differences, and I couldn't really ignore them, not responsibly. So I decided to just delve in to figure out if I could solve what was going on with mostly gender issues in leadership, why the same behaviors that when women did them were viewed negatively were viewed positively for men. and I still have not totally solved this. But in working on the unconscious bias stuff, I've really found that I think at this point, some organizations are achieving great diversity, but they're still lacking inclusion. And so I think it's time to start. We need to keep the effort on diversity going. But for those organizations that already have diversity, we need a new conversation for them about how can they best incorporate all of the diverse perspectives in their organization. It was kind of a long answer.
Oh, we love long answers. That's one of the things we can do on this show, so we're happy to have them. Talk a little bit about your own background. You said you were first generation.
Yeah, so I am first generation college student. Neither of my parents went to college. I'm from Los Angeles. My grandparents were immigrants from Mexico on my mom's side, and my dad is typical long American kind of like mutt of different nationalities. And even though like my parents hadn't gone to college, I always loved school and education. I had this idea that the one thing that people can never take away from you is your education. It's like you are a smarter person, you've learned more, and no one can ever take that away from you. People can lose their jobs, as we have seen so many Americans lose their jobs. But the knowledge that you gain through education, people can't take that away. And so I decided to go to the extreme and stay in school like literally forever, because PhD takes a really, really long time. But then even being a professor, I still go to school every day and get to learn new things and interact with other super smart people who teach me things all the time.
I know from being a professor that that's absolutely true. Tell me, do you identify as a Latina? How do you think of yourself race-wise?
Yeah, I always think of myself as Mexican. I don't know if Mexicans are Latinas or if you're a female, you're a Latina, but maybe because I grew up in California, where in California, I think the majority of the Hispanic community is Mexican. If you're in New York, it might be Puerto Rican or something else, but I guess to me that is important to my identity. Like I grew up with just my mom and my grandma, and my people spoke Spanish in my house, and we did only ate Mexican food until I think I went to college. There's other foods, and so I think that's
food, right? You didn't say we're going to order Mexican tonight or eat Mexican.
I still eat it. I still eat it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you can beat it. I think Tex-Mex maybe even better, but I love Mexico.
One of the things that, in these difficult days, these really painful days, as we are having conversations, we're discovering that people, how they identify matters, right? Because the people judge you. And it'd be fair to say that not everyone would think you're Latina because of just the way that you may present to the world.
No, you're right. So first of all, I colored my hair, but even if I didn't, I think, I'm half white, and I think I could pass as a white person. And I think that obviously affords me a ton of what I consider like white privilege, because I don't, I guess people aren't discriminatory against me as a result of my race, and that's good. But on the flip side, since people might think that I'm white, I hear the worst things that people say, like things that they wouldn't actually say to someone who they thought was a person of color, but their beliefs about immigration and minority-owned businesses and things like that people will just tell me randomly on an airplane. I mean, not recently, but and so that can be tough, and to hear those negative comments about your community.
And that's tough. So when you reveal that, or do you even bother, or you just move on, or if you're stuck with somebody, do you ever take pleasure in kind of saying, I'm a person of color too?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I take like pleasure, and I would say, yes, I generally do say something if I have the emotional energy to say it one more time. Sometimes I feel like, this isn't my job to always have to do this. Like, why don't people go out and learn for themselves? So I don't have to keep saying this over and over again. But I thought for a long time that if you could confront those stereotypes by saying, you have these beliefs about Mexican Americans and we should build a wall to Mexico, but we've just had this great conversation and I'm Mexican American. Doesn't that change your beliefs? But it really doesn't. People just kind of make an exception. They keep the rule, but they are like, well, you're not, one of those Mexicans I'm talking about. So it's hard. I think people really can learn and grow. And I actually believe that exposure and interacting with people and forming relationships with people who are different from you is super effective. Maybe one of the only things that's effective at breaking down those stereotypes. But it's hard on the people who are doing it to always have to spend that energy to try to inform and enlighten people.
I totally understand, and I'm so happy to hear you kind of share these misadventures that sometimes happen when people put you in the wrong bucket, and people are judging you all the time, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think on both sides, I think that's just like human nature. That's how we make sense of things. We judge people, and it's easier to understand people if you can just neatly put them in boxes. But people are complex, and that's kind of what Inclusify is about. Is we don't fit in boxes. We're all these unique, multifaceted people, and that actually makes organizations in the world better. And it's leaders' job to bring that out, to create creativity and innovation, but also to help people feel like they're included and they belong in their organization and improve people's lives.
Absolutely. So let's just remind people that your book is actually launching very shortly. Is launching on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, and the book comes out, so people can go to inclusifybook.com right now and pre-order. We'll show the website and get people to go out and take a look at the book, of course. And you have some goodies for people who pre-order as well, which is really nice. So we'll do all of that in just a few minutes. In the meantime, everyone, please ask your questions about diversity and inclusion. Please ask those questions, and we will bring them to Professor Johnson. Let me take a look at some of the comments that are here. Paula Kiger is watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula is an amazing member of my team. She helps produce the New York Times Read Along and is part of the team that does all kinds of virtual events. And I want to just take this opportunity to remind everyone that if you have an event that you would like to turn virtual, please contact us. We do in-person events into virtual. We help you make your own talk show like this. We offer 10% of your production team, or we can be 110% of your production team, whatever you need. I tell folks, don't cancel that conference without talking to me. And please email me. My email you see right on the screen, Sri@Sri.net. Let's see who else is here right now. Pradnya is tagging Joya Das. Daniel's watching from Singapore. And Rose Horowitz is here, one of my amazing producers. And she's watching from Milford, Connecticut, which is about 10 minutes from New Haven and Yale. She says follow her and Vandana Menon for live tweets. Eager to hear more about Dr. Johnson's book and ideas on how leaders can recognize unconscious bias and strategies to mitigate it. And she's put the hashtag of my show on there. And by the way, Rose runs Women to Follow, hashtag Women to Follow, which is a terrific movement to get more women followed on social media. So I know that Dr. Johnson is somebody more people will want to follow. Ashok is watching from Kerala in India, and Sunny Slaughter is here, who gave me 2 amazing conversations in one weekend, both on Saturday night and Sunday morning, when we talked about the issues of the crisis around us. We called it a horrific week in America, and our focus was mostly on African Americans, but the pain that Latinos and Mexican Americans are going through is also very real. And we keep saying Black and brown people have pain here in this country that white people just cannot understand. And even my own people, who for the most part, the overeducated ones like me, have never learned the history, have never been forced to confront our own privilege. That doesn't mean that everyone in my community is rich or successful, or the Muslims amongst us don't face their own share of pain. But for the most part, we don't experience what Mexican Americans and Black Americans and Native Americans have experienced, Doctor. So let's see who else. Lots of comments here. Let's see here. I'm just going through this. There's so many comments here. Mark says, love the title of your book. It's all the name of a business that can answer to bias in Airbnb. Two young African Americans who are tired of abuse. He's talking about that. And Rose says to Sunny, thank you for joining us. And the hashtag is women to follow. Thanks for the shout out. Hi, Rupa from the other room. That's my wife. Rupa is watching from the other room. Actually, she's upstairs. I got kicked out, doctor, from my own apartment because I was doing too many meetings and live streaming 17 hours a week. So the family said, get out. What's it been like for you? Because you must be on Zoom all day long.
Yeah, lots of Zooming. So luckily I have the basement. I mean, this is more like, I'm very fortunate to have a space. I will say I've had some children bust in through those gray doors back there in embarrassing moments where one, I was on a meeting with an organization talking about Inclusify, and my husband was paying for pizza. So he I think he has to step on the porch to get the pizza. It was for dinner. And the kids took that moment because daddy was gone to bolt downstairs and run in and just hug. And I'm like, yeah, this is my meeting.
But that's par for the course now. I mean, if it doesn't happen, I'm surprised these days.
I think it's kind of good. So this is positivity. I think it's good because I feel like so much of the time at work, we wear, masks and veils and uniforms to make us look a certain way to fit in. And we try to so many of us try to leave a lot of our life outside of the workplace. And obviously that's not a great way to go to work every day. It's exhausting. But now I think the veil's lifted, the jig is up. Everyone knows, yes, I wear stretchy pants every day, all day. And those people are my children and they're the most important part of my life. So, why shouldn't they be part of my work life too? And, in a lot of ways, I think it's actually increased people's empathy, just the sudden awareness of oh my God, everyone's life is not exactly like mine. Who knew all this time, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's good in the end too. I mean, overall the experience is bad because a lot of people are really hurting from this and have died and are really sick and lost their job. But the part about my kids busting in the room, I think is maybe that's good. I can stop trying to pretend.
I completely agree with that. I think it's shown that not everyone has that kind of perfect life that we have curated for the world at the office. And when we see it at home, I think it's brought a lot of new reality into people's lives. And I think it's good. Can we give a shout out to your family? Tell us who's who and how old and all of that.
They were fighting really loud and it was kind of ugly. So I asked my husband to take them up to their rooms. It's probably almost bedtime for them. They go to sleep 7:30, but they are Katie and Kyle. Shout out. I'll make them watch this later. And they are 6 and 8. And they're just the very best part of my life and the most important people. And the people, maybe for whom I really wrote the book Inclusify, so they can live in a better work world or a better world when they grow up. Because I don't want them to have to deal with the same pressures that so many people in my generation have had to face.
And of course, we want to also, since I'm a husband, I want to make sure the husband gets a shout out too.
Oh yes, sorry, Pete. My dear husband, Pete, who's also a college professor at the University of Colorado in biology, who has been homeschooler extraordinaire over the last 2.5 months. My kids just finished school. Our school ends really early, but he took them out to do field research, and we have adopted, I think, 13 salamanders from the wild that now live in our dining room. We're raising them into hopefully metamorphosis. And then I don't know what happens to them because I don't think we can fit 13 salamanders in our dining room. But the kids have gotten some major science education. They have little biology book logs that they write down where they've gone and what they've done and counted zooplankton and stuff.
I'm a little worried about those 13 salamanders.
No, well, I like this. I don't want to air any dirty laundry, but I think one of them has actually eaten some of the others. The salamanders are kind of vicious creatures, and one was really big, Sally, the salamander, and there's some missing salamanders. They could be under some weeds or something, but I think they've been eaten.
How do you know they're not under your closet, in your
They
closet,
might be.
something like that?
Well,
I'd be freaking out. I mean, this is also where you live in Colorado, outdoors. You have a different attitude to these things than us city folk living in Manhattan, don't you?
probably, yeah. And also right now they're swimming. They're like in the water. They can't walk yet. So I don't think they're not in my closet. But my daughter Katie also has a gecko, and she just went camping, of course, because Colorado, right? So she and my husband took a daddy-daughter camping trip last week, and she has like a big tub of crickets to feed the gecko, and she left it open. And my son and I just started to see crickets everywhere in our house. And so we went and checked her room, and sure enough, there's just like crickets everywhere. This is like horrifying for some people, but
yeah, horrifying for me. Just
oh, it's but this is life.
life in Colorado. All right, we'll take your word for it. Neil says, my wife was also a first-generation college student. She also got a PhD. That's a huge step for a family in one generation. So can you talk a little bit about that, and what was it like for you? What were the circumstances in your family that allowed you to go to college and change your life in that way?
Yeah. I would love to have like a, happy story, but my family was pretty poor. Like we were welfare, food stamps. And so I don't think it was like, we like lucked out and won the lottery. And so I got to go on to this great college, which I did. I went to this amazing college, but I think it was just like a lot of luck, I guess, hard work, persistence, this teachers and mentors who I had who just inspired me to want to keep studying and learning and doing research. And so I don't know, I think there has to just be like a lot of luck. I think God helped, and somehow or another it all came together.
And luck is certainly part of the story for many, many people. And what we're trying to say is that it shouldn't be all luck, right? There should be opportunity, and so that people can go in and learn. I think that really matters. Talk about your, how you decided where to go to school, and then how did you decide to stay on and study and get a PhD, and where you went to school. Tell us a little bit about the backstory.
Oh, sure. So I grew up in Alhambra, California. It's kind of near East LA. In Los Angeles, and
is it near where all the curfews and things are happening now, or is it in a different?
Oh yeah,
part? LA is so big, so we don't know.
I'm sure they're curfewed for sure. But I got to go on a college tour to these little liberal arts colleges in Los Angeles called the Claremont Colleges. And when I went on the tour, I thought this is like, it reminded me of like Beverly Hills 90210. It was just like so glamorous, and there were literally kids sitting in convertibles and stuff. And I thought, this is where I want to go. And it's a tiny school. It had 1,000 students when I was a student there. And so you got like a lot of attention, which I think felt a little safer for me to have like that kind of mentorship from my teachers and professors. And so that's where I went. It was, all in all, like a fantastic college experience. I would want my kids to go to a small liberal arts college, just because the access you have to faculty and the like networks that you form, I think are like amazing. And then I did my PhD at Rice, which is another small school, which had like the same thing, just like really great mentors, really great teaching for students. And that's still, my philosophy, even though I teach at the University of Colorado, which we have, it's a big, big school, but we try to create that same kind of feeling where students feel seen. And there's some statistic that I read that the best predictor of a student staying in college, so not dropping out, is knowing one professor. And so I always try and like, how many students can I know? Because like, you never know which ones you're going to lose. And I don't want to lose any of them, because I feel like this is such a great opportunity, right? To get that degree and to get all the learning. And so I try to still get that small school feel, even though we have thousands and thousands of students.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Ashok asks, is the book available in India yet? You may not know, right?
I think it is, but it's also on Kindle or those, e-readers. And so I think you can download it.
Okay.
But I do think it is available in India.
Yeah. Inclusifybook.com is the website, and people can go there, and we'll look at it in just a few minutes. Sudha is watching. Sudha is the mother of our colleague and friend Neil Parekh, who is involved in so many of the things that I do, all the digital shenanigans, as we call them. And Sudha is a great supporter of the work that we do, and we're very grateful. Let's see who else is watching. Mark Lee's watching from Durham, North Carolina. And Twyla says, love that she identifies as Mexican. I think Latina does not normally reflect Mexican background. Love that she loves Mexican and Tex-Mex. So, every word you say is analyzed here. Did you realize that?
Yes.
Let's see. And Sunny says exactly to that. And Mark says, I'm a light-skinned African-American who could plainly pass if I wanted to in some ways until I opened my mouth. He has a podcast and is a great voice. He's been a guest. He stopped by our show and he watches all the time. I have a story that is fascinating. I remember decades ago, a friend of mine who was European American went to an Asian restaurant with a lot of workers, some of whom were African Americans, was encountered with some very negative racial terms. What they did not realize that my friend spoke Mandarin and realized what the person was saying. And that this is the kind of, as I keep saying, kind of misadventures, adventures in American racial issues. What is the most common misconception people have about your Mexican heritage?
About my Mexican heritage, I mean, I feel like I've had people tell me like I'm not Mexican enough. Like, you're not really Mexican because you're, blonde, or you dye your hair blonde at least. And I think that's harsh. I don't know what makes someone enough of a race. Like, to me, it's really central to my identity. I feel like, it's just like it's who I am. I don't really know how to argue that I am enough. I think that part's hard. That's hard. But the other thing that's really tough is I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is like, honestly, I think it may be the whitest place on earth. I like it. It's not a bad place. Come visit, but it's just like there's no ethnic diversity, and that I think can be really tough because I try to teach my kids, like, this is your heritage. We were actually going on sabbatical to Mexico, which we're not because Mexico's closed their borders to the United States. But
they're building a wall, right? That's what
I know now. Isn't that ironic? But they wouldn't build a wall. But you can't travel internationally. Even if we could, the school wouldn't let us go anywhere right now. But there's just not a lot of diversity, and I have been confronted with this like really tough question of like, how, if you're someone who really cares about diversity and inclusion, how can you live in a place that lacks diversity? And it's really true. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to do something immediately. I've got to move, go back to Los Angeles, or like find some way to live in my own community and support my own community. But I haven't done it yet. Like, I think the plan to go to Mexico, I thought was like this is a good first step. My kids will be not in Boulder. They'll be around all Spanish speakers. They'll get really good at speaking Spanish. They'll see like the amazing parts of their Mexican heritage. But COVID, so soon enough.
Another thing we can blame on COVID.
It's really, in the grand scheme of things, it is nothing. Like, for all of the suffering that's happened as a result of COVID, my sabbatical plans are like very low on the tragedies list. So I'm not complaining. I think like we're very fortunate. Luckily, as professors, is, one of the things that you get away with is lifetime employment. So that feels pretty safe right now.
I want to thank you. I want to just remind everyone you're watching an interview with Professor Stefanie K. Johnson, PhD. She's a professor, author, and speaker. Her new book is called Inclusify: The Power of Uniqueness and Belonging to Build Innovative Teams. And Billie Jean King, the great Billie Jean King, said that your positive spin on what we can achieve by working together will change the workplace. And of course, the workplace is changing in a variety of ways because of COVID-19. People are deciding whether to go back into the office, not to go back into this office, what that means. And so there's so many things that are happening. Let's go back to our comments and see. Neil Parekh says, learning my ethnicity changed my wife's grandfather's perception of Indians. He met me, we talked Yankees and pizza, he liked me, didn't realize I was Indian. After that, he stopped saying things about Indian people.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and Mark says, I remember going to see Coretta Scott King speak with a white student friend who was at a date at the time. Ironically, we caught abuse from both the African-American student associations and the white students, heard zebra jokes from the white students, and was shunned at the reception by fellow members of my society. And we should acknowledge that racial difficulties can come from any side, right? Every community has, you, as you described, sometimes you're told you're not Mexican enough. And that says something about how we think about all of this. And Vandana, who is one of my producers, says, is quoting you, even if we have diversity, we don't necessarily have inclusion. Dr. Stefanie Johnson's book is out on Tuesday. Here's the link to Inclusify's virtual launch. So that's great. And thank you, Vandana, for doing that. And that's a good cue for us to share your book and your website so everybody can take a look at that. It's inclusifybook.com. And this is also my chance to let you give a shout out to all the people it takes to put a book together, right? Your agent and your editor and your...
Yes, thanks for that. Michael Palgun, who's my agent, is amazing. Hoseline Main, who's done all of my social media. He is more than I can ever say. My publisher, HarperCollins, has been fantastic and helpful, and I think took a chance to let a professor publish a pop management book or like popular press book. So I appreciate that. And then one of my students, Mariela, has been helping with a lot of my social media stuff. And I appreciate her as well. Of course, my family and my University of Colorado at Boulder, Leeds School of Business, has been super supportive in letting me take some time. It's taken some time away from my professoring to write the book, and they've been super supportive of this, especially because they believe in the topic so much.
Yeah, and that of course is so important to have that support from your boss. Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who's the world's leading expert on leadership thinking, has praised your book. Adam Grant has praised your book. He's a rock star in kind of popular press as well. And you have studies from Salesforce and PayPal and GM, and there's Billie Jean King. So great to see how all of that's come through. You've got a free chapter that you offer for folks who are learning all of this. So we encourage everybody to go there, get your free chapter now. 4 key behaviors that belong. So here are all the different titles. 7 leadership archetypes defined and the leadership matrix, how to outperform your competition by 147%. That's very, very precise. You got my attention. So tell me about the 147%.
That is among companies that are more inclusive. They outperform their similar peers by 147%.
All right, so I got to get on that case if I want to do that. But isn't it, on a serious note, Professor, isn't it true that it's at times of crisis that people, even who want to do diversity and inclusion, say we can't afford it, we don't have time for it, we got to just do what we were doing in the old days and can't waste time on this or waste resources on this?
Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, I think that's the tough part about the situation. It's like, this is when we need to be focusing on diversity and inclusion more than ever, because the impact of COVID on the African-American community has been much greater than other communities. And the impact on parents, I'll say, because I have kids, and people with mental health issues. I haven't heard about this or read much about it, but I have to imagine this is a huge diversity issue right now for people who are working at home. You don't have the social support that you used to have. It's like, I think it's pretty depressing for everyone. And so this is really when organizations need to be focusing on people, but right now they're concerned with strategy, like how do we change, how do we pivot to fit in this new market and things are different, and you have layoffs, and so they might not be thinking about diversity. And I've heard this from some of the organizations I work with. It's like hard to get attention toward this issue when they're like, listen, we're laying people off, but it's like, yes, but who are you laying off? And that's an important thing to think about, because if you're disproportionately laying off women or older workers or people of color, then that's not just right. You're going to end up with a worse organization in the end. So it's a tough balance, but I also understand businesses are laying off hundreds and thousands of workers, and so I know they're in a bind too. But I feel like if you could look at all of your decisions right now through the lens of diversity and inclusion, then you'd actually make much better decisions. And the really values-driven organizations that I've worked with and seen are actually investing more money and time and effort into diversity and inclusion right now. I'll just give an example that really blew me away. One is the accounting firm Crow. It's one of the top 10 largest accounting firms in the world. And amidst COVID, they brought in their first ever chief diversity officer, because they're like, this is when we really need, they're committed to diversity and inclusion all the time, but they're like, we need someone who is focusing on diversity and inclusion at everything we're doing right now. And so they have their first chief diversity officer.
That's great. Crow is spelled CROWE.com. We want to give a shout out to companies that do good things. And so I'm so glad that you shared that with us. Of course, as America burns, our focus is on racial and ethnic diversity questions, but talk a little bit about women and the progress we have made for women in the workplace and the lack of progress at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I think one of the best things to happen in the last 4 years is I think people don't deny anymore that there's gender bias in the workplace. It was 4 years ago. I was fortunate enough to speak at the White House in the Obama administration and on a corporate Diversity in America conference. And I think at that time, the people there cared about diversity, but they were like, some people question, how bad is bias against women? Really? And women too would deny, I personally have never experienced bias in the workplace. Because it's hard to say that you've been discriminated against. It actually hurts your self-esteem to say, people judge me negatively because of my race or gender. But I think now, everyone agrees, we've seen, I think with Me Too, how can you possibly argue that there's no gender discrimination in the workplace when you learn that 90% of women are experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace? So I thought the first step to achieving equality is recognizing that you don't have equality. Because if you're trying to pretend you do, then there's no motivation to change. So I think that's huge. We've seen a big increase in the number of women on corporate boards, which I think is important and good and useful. And we see that is great for organizations. It is linked to higher stock prices, and it tends to result in more women being hired throughout the executive team and even throughout the organization, because the board members have a gender lens when they're making these decisions. There's still not a lot of women CEOs in the Fortune 500, but I think there's the big leap forward is just the recognition that there's a benefit of diversity and inclusion. It positively impacts teams. It creates greater innovation, improves engagement, all of those things, and that we haven't achieved that yet, and there's room to grow, and that we can do it. There's a lot of ways we haven't done it yet, and I imagine with the impact of COVID, we could see even greater gains for equality, or we can see we could backslide back into the 2000s. And so I'm really focused on how can we make sure that this is an opportunity for diversity and inclusion and not it's going to deter our efforts.
And so that's certainly one of the things that we can discuss and work on. I think all of us should do that. May I ask you a question that I hear from some women who say that sometimes they feel that women aren't as supportive as they could be of other women. Is that something you've heard? Is that something that's true? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. There's a chapter or two in the book in Inclusify about this, because I never believed that. I thought it was like an urban legend of, women who don't support other women. And I love women. So I didn't really believe that was a real thing. But in doing the research for the book, I did hear that come up from women who admitted, I used to be less supportive of women than I should have been, or from subordinates when I interviewed leader and follower dyads or teams, subordinates who are like, she's not supportive of other women. I don't think it's as prevalent as people make it out to be. I think there's kind of a let's blame women for women not getting ahead, and it's like, I don't really think we need to blame anyone. We just need to make it better. But it is something I hear a lot, like, oh, aren't women hardest on women? And I mean, I'm gonna just say no. I don't think so. I think for the most part, and especially with the younger generation, there's like so much girl power, so much like raw women that I don't think it's a thing. They don't believe it either. They're like, that doesn't happen. But maybe it used to, especially, I can imagine when there were so few women at the top of organizations that, we saw in research that women really adopted a super masculine style. And in doing so, maybe they don't support other women. And I'll say one last thing, that I did this study a few years ago that showed that when women do support other women, they're actually viewed negatively by their bosses. And so maybe there's another reason why maybe women don't outwardly support other women as much as they should, if there is this kind of backlash effect from their superior who's like, you just hired her because she's a woman. But for the most part, I think, women, we've got to support each other. People of color, we've got to support each other. White men, we've got to support each other. I think it's everyone working together that's going to really create change.
All right, we're looking at this Inclusify quiz that you have, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if I've obviously not taken it, but I thought I would just kind of read out some of the questions here. I don't care whether people face diversity, I only care that they're qualified. So I guess my answer is, I do care if they face diversity, so I strongly disagree. I have put qualifications above culture fit in terms of who I want on my team. These are making you think. This is not a simple.
You're like, sometimes maybe neutral.
Yeah, but this shows you that you want people to think, right? With this book, it's about understanding and thinking about how we feel about these things. You can't just do it all on gut.
No, definitely not. Gut's the worst. When we go with our gut, we are the most biased toward the status quo, right? If you go with your gut, you're like, choose the person who looks like every other person who we've had in this role. So if you cannot go with your gut, that's good. But it's funny, like, people really trust their gut, and there's like gut instinct, right? You believe it because you feel it and you experience it, and there's something to be said, like maybe the gut can help you at times, but I think when it comes to these kinds of decisions, what you need is data, not gut.
Well, I think we've just upset some Malcolm Gladwell fans. Didn't you?
I know.
About, like, blink everything. You can decide in a blink. Don't worry. Just make decisions.
If you think art is phony, go with your gut. But when you're hiring people, go with the data.
I like that. Angela says, thank you for raising important points about the role of South Asians. Daniel says, Inclusify is the new conversation that a lot of companies, my company included, will be having for the 21st century. Great, Daniel. Please do contact the professor and hire her to come and talk to you. Buy a lot of copies of the book for your staff. And Mark is about to order dinner, so he's lots of online ordering. We heard about the pizza ordering that you were doing.
Yeah.
Rohit says, positivity and Inclusify just may be the only natural prescription for a COVID situation. I like, these are all endorsements.
Yeah, thanks.
That's great. And Upali is watching from India, and she's a professor as well. Mark says, I also hate when people put our culture in one category. Yes, we're unified in the struggle, but there are also divisions and groups. Not all Latin Americans are the same. There are differences between Hondurans, Brazilians, Mexicans, and that's just a few. Same thing with Pakistanis, Indians. Absolutely. Pradnya says her kids are 5 and 7. They consider it a fun challenge to photobomb my Zoom calls as loudly as possible.
I feel you.
Yeah. And you have an invitation. Ashok is inviting you to Kerala in India, God's own country. I don't know if you've been to India yet.
I have not.
Okay. And Daryl's tuning in from Richmond Hill in Queens, New York. We love having these people from around the world here. And Arlene says, I had a live stream with a friend about giving birth during COVID-19. The newborn was quiet. A ton of tears down on the bed, and her husband stopped in to say hello. It was great. It was the reality of being cooped up with kids in a New York City apartment. So you suddenly feel very lucky that you don't have all of that going on, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel lucky. I feel lucky regardless, but I can't imagine having a little baby right now. And like, I think it would be tough to be in New York. It's if you live in the city or any city that if you can't get outside, I think there's something to be said for just, it helps like calm the brain and warm the heart to just be like outside in the sun.
Sure. Twyla says, sometimes I think men and women share competitiveness. And she says, you must go to India.
I must. I can't travel out of state right now, but yes, I must.
You will. And by the way, just want to acknowledge, even as we're talking and we're trying to be upbeat and positive, there's still so much pain happening right now. Police in Union Square are flashing white power hand signals, says Jonathan. That's scary. Face masks and nightsticks are out. And more demonstrations in Union Square. A fleet of bicycles went there a few minutes ago, and now it's a fleet of police vehicles. I think that the saying that women are hardest on women was a thing in the 80s. Not so. Very nice, Rose. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that very much. Twyla says, Madeleine Albright and the special place in hell for women who don't support other women. So
Madeleine Albright said that it's got to be right.
Look at that. Rose says 3 men say that. I'm glad you're pointing that out. Nikhil, who is a terrific business journalist, he says, is inclusiveness the key to racial harmony if a company hires you to meet a diversity quota and you know that? I wonder if being hired partly because of your ethnicity could take away from intrinsic value of the job and thus your motivation and positivity. Interesting. What do you think?
I think that's tough. I think, you know what, if you want to hire me, hire me. I don't care if you hire me because I'm a woman or I'm Mexican or I study inclusion or people get jobs all the time because your dad plays golf with their mom or just like all sorts of wacky reasons, right? You went to the same school. It's like, take the opportunity. It sucks when they don't hire you because of your race or gender. Take the opportunity and kill it and be the best employee they ever had. I definitely understand the feeling of you don't want to be hired for anything other than your qualifications. But the reality is most of the time, people's race or gender or sexual orientation is not helping them get jobs. Like that's what my research shows. Maybe that's an urban legend that all these women are getting jobs as a result of their gender. It's more likely that they're not getting the job because of their gender. And then when they do get the job, despite overcoming a higher hurdle, people are like, oh, it's because of their gender. So I say, just take the job and kill it.
Twyla says Dr. Johnson is refreshing. So that's a great compliment. Twyla is a tough grader. You should know that. She is one tough cookie. So if she says you're refreshing, that's you understand grading and how some professors are a little more have a higher bar. She's one with a higher bar. She says hippie Boulder, so white. I'm white, total wasp, but trying my best. She says, and she says Pradnya says Palm Beach, Florida is the whitest place on earth.
I don't know that I've been to Palm Beach, Florida. That's funny.
Joe Appio, who's watching outside Atlanta. Sri, you are the calm in the storm. Your voice is that of unification and peace. All we're saying is give peace a chance. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for support. These 81 days, I cannot imagine how we've done this, and only because of the support of people like Joe. How do you address those who don't realize how rich the Latin community is? I mean, just musically, culturally, there's everything from upbeat sounds of Brazil to the more rural sounds of Mexico. How do you address that?
I know, just bring them dancing, man. Take them to do some salsa or hang out with them. I think it's hard not to love the Hispanic community. It's like such a party. I think it's such a great culture, but maybe I'm biased. I'm probably biased, but
you are biased, but that's okay. That's good bias. And what is the potential to further diversity in location that is homogeneous in racial ethnicity other than gender diversity?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, of course, sexual orientation, disability, veteran status. People talk a lot about neurodiversity. So are you bringing in people with different, like neuroatypical, and just people with different perspectives? I mean, we're like so amazing at bringing in the same people that even new companies tend to hire graduates from the exact same school. So anything you can do to bring in different perspectives is going to create a richer environment.
Thank you. And Twyla asks if Boulder had any protests regarding Mr. Floyd.
Denver did. Boulder hasn't. We don't have that many people in Boulder. When the school, since all the kids have been sent out of school, that's a major percentage of our population. And
Sure.
So most of the people in Boulder have driven to Denver for the protests. We've had.
By the way, how far is Denver and Boulder?
It's like maybe 20 miles, but people say it's a whole nother world. It's like, oh yeah.
20 miles, that is nothing. And
it's nothing. I know. Colorado's not that big, I guess. It's from being from Los Angeles. I mean, like all this is very, very close, but
sure. Joe says, my neighborhoods have always been diverse, from Cincinnati to Brooklyn to Somerset, New Jersey to Atlanta. We have become the better of it. So he's talking as somebody who lives in diverse communities. So that's great. And Sudha says some of the Indian motel owners hired white managers for the show in order to create the image that the motel was owned by white Americans. Customers had bad image of Indian Americans at some point, and that's part of it. Joe says inclusiveness is the key to racial harmony. And Daniel, who we had talked about before, is starting this diversity initiative right in the middle of this crisis. There is no better time.
Oh, Daniel.
Yeah. And Roberta says, thank you from Richmond, Virginia. And Mark Lee is noticing the artwork in the walls behind you. So we'll give a shout out to
my art. I didn't do any of that art, but they are pictures from many of the different countries that we have been fortunate enough to vacation in. So we buy these tiny prints, there's like kangaroos over my head, and just wherever we go, we buy a little picture. I don't know if we've done it.
And a salamander under your desk, I'm sure.
But I don't even know it. Under my desk. I haven't even told you about the tarantulas yet.
Oh, please don't. Please don't. I don't want to hear about your tarantulas right now. Mark says that I also want to invite you to come on his podcast whenever you're ready. So we should have your social team reach out to him.
Absolutely.
Just reach out on inclusifybook.com, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Roberta says, thank you. What does Dr. Johnson feel will be the same as the country reopens, and also what will be different?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. Nothing feels the same. I don't know if anything will be the same. I think family is the same. I think that's like really been for me, my rock. Although I have to say, like, my mom lives here in Boulder too, and we haven't seen her for 80 days because we're worried about infecting her. So that's hard on a family that tends to spend a lot of time together. But what won't be the same, I think people will be working from home for another year, maybe forever. I think like a lot of organizations that I work with, we can't have people working from home because we have sensitive data, or, we have all these reasons. But clearly none of those reasons, like, we could overcome all of those reasons. And now we have, and now we've shown that we can do it. So I think there'll be more working from home as we go back. I don't know. One of the things I wonder about is, like, when will we ever have huge crowds of people together again? Like in a baseball stadium or a concert or a TEDx or something. Like, I don't know when we're going to get back to that and people will feel safe.
Though they are feeling safe to protest and they're feeling safe to go to the beach. And so I just don't understand that. You're right, though. As you and I are organizers of events, we have to be careful. It's not like we run a beach or something. So we have to be extra careful.
Yeah, but even our protesters, at least in Denver, they're wearing masks.
Right. That's true. That's true. Professor, it's already 10:06, so we've gone past our hour. Do you have time for just a couple of quick comments? And
absolutely.
Thank you. You're very kind to spend extra time with us. What is the percentage of women on corporate boards? Isn't it less than 25%?
Yes. So let's see. I think the average corporate board has exactly 2 women. So it's somewhere around 20%, which is a pretty big increase than it was in like 2016. But depending on where you are, so like across the world, this is a really global group. Some countries have a lot of women on board. Some countries
and they also have laws. They also have laws.
Yeah,
you have that.
Like
do you think laws are important or no? Do you think that'd be wrong to mandate?
Well, I'm actually doing a huge study on the impact of laws in Nordic countries that have passed gender quotas for boards to see if it's like good or bad. But I mean, my feeling is it works. And like in the United States, I think outside of California, it's people don't like being mandated to do things. People don't even like being mandated to wear masks. So I don't think it'll happen here, but it seems to have been effective in the countries that have used it. I actually like the activist investor groups that say, if you're not going to diversify your board, then we're not going to invest in your company anymore, because we know that having gender diversity on your board is positively linked to stock prices. So if you're not willing to do it, we're not going to invest, because that's like a free market kind of situation. We can invest our money wherever we want, right?
And isn't it also something that we're seeing with investors in startups, that if you don't have female execs in the leadership, we don't want to invest, is something we're seeing as well. Daryl says a lot of people, sorry to say, especially white people, have blinders on. So that's his something that
I froze for a second. That's why I didn't respond.
No, that's okay.
I think that is probably true. There's people who have blinders on, but we'll see how things come out of COVID. I think like people have taken their blinders off, especially like when you start to strip people of some of their privileges. And like, we have the best nanny. Her name's Kaylin. She's been our nanny for 8 years. My oldest child is 8 years old. And in this COVID crisis, she is now, like, we hired her when she was in high school, and now she's a nurse. And so she's working down in Denver Health on COVID. And so she's not coming to be our babysitter anymore. So we all of a sudden, we don't have childcare. And when you start to lose some of those things, you really start to re-experience some of that empathy, which maybe you don't always think about. Like, maybe not everyone has a KK nanny who's been their nanny for 8 years. And when you don't have that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is really challenging. And I feel like that is happening in so many ways, right? Like, people are having to experience their own hardships, maybe for the first time for some people, and they are seeing it on Zoom, like seeing a little bit into people's lives and the different experiences that people have.
Sure. If Twyla says, if foreign countries already have the data, what's the issue with working from home?
If foreign countries already have the data on,
I guess that people do work remotely. I guess that's one of the. We have lots of questions coming, so I'm just going to read some of these, and then you can respond to some.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Olinda says, I was in the corporate world for over 25 years in Dubai, but saw this issue in a very pronounced way, although not very loud. We also had a comment earlier. Manuel is watching in Spain and applauding you. And we earlier saw a comment saying that sexual harassment continues to be a problem. And isn't it interesting that so many of the leaders in the art world, nonprofit world, are women who rise to the top? Do you think that men look at those as somehow not as appealing or kind of softer skills? I don't want to be stereotypical, but what is your thoughts on why that is, that we see so many women succeed in the nonprofit world and have so many opportunities there?
I think there's data on this, but women and people of color tend to gravitate toward jobs that have a positive impact. Like that seems more important. And, Gen Z, this like young generation right now in school, I think the men and women both feel that way equally, maybe. But I think that's why we find more women in those fields, because they want to have a positive impact. Same thing with people of color. They want to see that they're making their community better because they've experienced how bad it can be, right? But then I think there's something else, that the way we reinforce kids' interests when, I think I was a little girl, right? And I wasn't very little. I'm like actually enormous. But when I was in high school and I took, AP calculus, people were like, do you really need to take this class? Like, why do you aren't you going to study psychology? So I think that also kind of shapes where they end up. But I think that's changing too. At least, I don't know everywhere in the world or everywhere in the US, but I'll tell you, my kids we tried really hard to give them equal gender roles.
Great. Okay, let's make this the last question, because otherwise looks like you're so popular, we'll just keep getting these coming in. What are 3 things you'd recommend executives to think about regarding diversity?
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm just going to pick 3. I would consider how you are assigning tasks to people, and if that's equitable, especially right now. Like, I talk to managers who are like, I'm on the phone with my right-hand man all the time, and like maybe you're giving them more opportunities. And so I like to say, just like keep a list of all of the things that you have to get done, and then kind of keep track of who you're giving different tasks to and see if it's equitable. One of the big things that we see is a difference in mentoring and sponsorship of women and people of color. And so I think we should all be trying to mentor people who are similar to us and different from us. And I think leaders are in a great position to be sponsors for people who are different from them, because they have the credibility to go on a limb and really champion someone. And then maybe a third thing is that inclusion matters. Like, it's not just about letting people come to the table. It's not about having people fit in. It's about showing everyone how they fit together as their unique selves, and how the workplace and the world is better when we all bring our differences to the table.
It's beautifully put. I can just give you an example from my own business. We run a very small business, as you can imagine, consulting business. One of the things we're doing during COVID is that we are talking to each other a lot, our team members, and it's very comfortable for me to finish my 9 p.m. show and then do a 10:30 call, 10 o'clock call. And I got called out on it by a couple of my colleagues, saying, the guys can call and hang out at night and chat like this, but it's hard for women, even when they have very supportive husbands or family members, whether they have or not, doesn't matter, right? The fact that they have to get the kids ready in the morning, they have to make sure the dishes are done. In my own family, as aware as I try to be, I'm leaving things undone because my wife will take care of it. And I feel guilty about that. So in our own company, we're now saying we're going to limit as much as possible meetings at 10:30 at night. This was not even an issue, of course, before COVID. But as you said, who you give things to, who you ask people, you give opportunities to. Same thing with a 7:30 a.m. meeting, because even though kids are not going to school, getting them ready for school, typically a mom does that, even no matter how high-powered she is, how experienced she is, how much work she has to do. That's those gender stereotypes, don't you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. The kid thing, it's like the kids, and I'm a mom, right? So my kids want me to do these things. Maybe they expect it, but I also want to do it. That's like, I don't want to miss out on those moments. I like getting them up in the morning, and I think the workplace should be allow people to do that, and it creates opportunities for men to do it too.
Thank you. And here are a couple of quick comments. Jocelyn says, I'm reaching out to schedule some time for Dr. Steph Johnson to be on your podcast. I missed some last message, DM details, thanks.
Thank
And
you.
and Twyla says, I should tell you about my policy regarding manels. This is a direct result of my daughter that I decided I would not speak on any all-male panels, and then I decided I would not attend any all-male panels or
I
webinars.
love it.
So I've been doing that for 4 years now, and I've gotten a lot of credit on the internet for this. And this is the problem. Women have been saying the same thing for 50 years, but because a couple of men said something, it became, I was put on CNN to talk about this.
Wow.
And a big splash was made. And that's, again, where you don't realize that when you give a platform for a man to say these things about manels, you're, again, kind of, the problem and the solution are kind of in the question itself, and we're going to address that on June 8th. That's 2 Mondays from now, with Gina Glantz of the great organization Gender Avenger. If you aren't familiar with them, you got to check them out. Gender Avenger.
I'll be right here.
You will love them. And Indra Nui, the great CEO of Pepsi, talked about getting her kids ready and out to school while she was CEO and chairman of PepsiCo.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Twyla says, step up, Sri, and all men. Do it like women have been doing for centuries. Sincerely, one tough cookie. Thank you, Twyla. And Neil says, I'm guilty of the same thing. Late night, early calls put more of a burden on Pam, his wife. The only thing I can think of doing is the dishes, laundry at 1 a.m. after our late night meetings. And is it possible, Jocelyn asks, is it possible to fit in and stand out?
Yes, Joseline, it is possible to fit in and stand out. That's the whole premise of the book Inclusify, is that we're looking at trying to allow people to be their unique selves. And because everyone's being your unique self, you all fit in, or fit together, I like to say.
Oh, that's great. We'll show your book one more time, and then we'll say goodbye to you so that you can get back to your evening with your kids. The book is inclusifybook.com, but you also have a website, drstephjohnson.com, and so people can check that out. The book comes out on Tuesday, and you are hosting a show on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's get rid of these banners here.
The best show on computer right now.
I'm sorry?
The best show on the computer right now.
There you go. The book launch is 7 p.m. Eastern time. Inclusify Book is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and at Dr. Steph Johnson on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and LinkedIn, and everywhere. So everyone, please follow and connect, and I'll give you a chance to give us a final thought.
Yes, you want my final thought? Yes. Okay. So my final thought is that thank you, Sri, for creating an environment like this where people can continue to interact and belong and connect when we're feeling so far apart. And I talked early on in our conversation today about the benefits of learning and just stretching our minds and constantly trying to learn new things. And you're really helping people do that right now in a time where maybe we can't even go to the library to get a book. So I appreciate you and thank you for doing this. And then thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much. We wish you the very best. And we talked about doing a quick debrief after my show. So I'm going to do some housekeeping, but I want to let you go now. And maybe we can chat after in a couple of minutes. But thank you so much, Dr. Stefanie K. Johnson. We are very grateful to you. And one of the things you will hear as I take you off the screen is I reintroduce my guests. Why? Because people join, every minute they're joining and jumping off on online, how it is. So I reintroduce our guests, and sometimes it's confusing for guests why we do that. But with that, we're going to say goodbye to Dr. Johnson. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon. And thank you for joining. And I know you learned a lot, just as I did in this conversation with Dr. Stefanie K. Johnson. A reminder, she's a professor at the University of Colorado. Her book is called Inclusify, The Power of Uniqueness and Belonging to Build Innovative Teams. It comes out from HarperCollins on Tuesday, June 2nd, inclusifybook.com. So we're very grateful to her for coming. Talking about inclusivity, I want to show you, this is our updated stats on our first 75 shows. We've had 155 guests in 75 shows, and 91 of them have been women. We're very proud of that number. It could be even higher. We have guests from 10 countries and 38 cities, 20 doctors and nurses, 20 plus authors and journalists, 10 plus CEOs and founders. We are trying to be as inclusive as we can. We're looking for ideas, speakers, topics, and sponsors. So please email me, sri@sri.net. You see the info right there. Also want to tell you that we would love to have you hire my team to produce a show like this for you, or to convert your conference into a virtual event, or help you with training, consulting. We can be 10% of your production team or 110% of your production team. We just did on Saturday the T4 conference, T4.education. 100,000 registered teachers joined us to talk and learn and share. And I hope you will think of us. We don't have to have a big event. We could do a small event, no event too small or too big. And we couldn't do the show without our sponsors. A big shout out to Muckrack Academy. We are creating a free certification course for fundamentals of social media. Everybody can benefit. It's free. Please take a photo. Please take a screenshot. Share it with friends and family right now. Fundamentals of social media. Just save your seat by going to mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much. Please give me feedback. Tell me how we can help you. We're so grateful for this global community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, big shout out to my friends at Scroll for sponsoring this show and getting the word, getting us on their social channels, which have millions of followers. So we're very, very grateful to all of you. And we wish you the very best, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. And we'll say goodbye. We are just grateful to all of you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks.